This is Vanessa Gorman, and I want to talk to you today about the basic building blocks of a sentence, which are words, phrases, and clauses. Words are pretty obvious, the smallest unit that we can utter in isolation that contains a meaning. So it's not a syllable, which is the smallest unit we can utter, but it has to contain some meaning as well. We conventionally separate words with spaces. In ancient Greek, they didn't necessarily do so. In fact, they would even write it backwards sometimes. They didn't use word division, they didn't use punctuation. All of those things were later additions that we are grateful for. Words can be contracted, where you leave out a letter and smash several words together. Can't is the contraction of cannot. I'm is the contraction of I am. A more formal name for this is elision. If you elide something, you leave it out. And so you can combine several words using elision. Now, words are identified by part of speech, and we call these post tags in our system, part of speech tags. And this is the label that indicates the category of the words that have similar grammatical properties. And the same word can have different parts of speech. The same word can function sometimes as a noun and sometimes as a verb. For example, I walk or I go for a walk. In one case, it's a verb, in one case, it's a noun. So part of speech isn't rigid. Some words can only be one thing or another. Philadelphia is only a noun. It's not a verb. It's not an adjective. It's not an adverb. But this identifies the category of the word. So we have verbs, and these are grossly oversimplified meanings. Linguists can argue about them, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to grossly oversimplify. A verb is the action or state of being. A noun is some kind of thing, person, place, thing, idea, any, a verb acting as a noun. It can be all kinds of things. The article is actually a kind of adjective that modifies the noun. It's the word the or a. The is a definite article and a is an indefinite article, terms we'll come back to later. An adjective is any word that by its nature modifies a noun or describes a noun. So an article is a kind of adjective because the doesn't make any sense without the table. Adjectives are the same way. The flat doesn't make sense without the noun table. Pronouns are words that can replace the noun, so I can say my cup is on it. I don't have to keep saying table over and over again. Adverbs modify verbs, adjectives, or another adverb. So if it is a very late train, the train is late, that's an adjective, but very late is an adverb. Again, all of these will go through one at a time as we get to the appropriate units. A preposition is a word that sets up a relationship between a noun or pronoun and some other word in the sentence. In, on, from, during, for, about, with, without. Lots and lots of little words that set up usually some kind of adverbial relationship, but not always. Conjunction joins two clauses. So the word and is a conjunction. It can join two words. It can join two anythings. An interjection is a word of exclamation that doesn't fit grammatically in the rest of the sentence. So words like hey or psst or swearing or things like that. So these are all different parts of speech that occur in Greek. There's not very many of them. We'll approach them one at a time and carefully understand each one at a time before we then go through the verb in great detail. So the part of speech tag includes the specific inflected form. Now, when I say inflected, I mean some words change their use according to what they do in a sentence. And what we call this inflected form is a morphology. Morphos means change, right? Metamorphosis. So morphos is the form that it takes, and the study of the form is morphology. So some forms change. The lemma is what we call the dictionary form, the word that you look up. So you don't look up them in the dictionary, you look up they. See, them is an inflected form of they. Rang is a inflected form of ring. It's a different form, but it all is under the word ring. Now, we don't inflect English very much. We do a little bit. So, for example, we do inflect nouns a little bit. We make singular and plural look different most of the time. And we make possessives look different most of the time, especially singular and plural possessives. We do see true inflection in something like pronouns. So, I, my, me, we, our, us, she, hers, her. These are examples of inflections. All of these words we would find under I. These are pronouns, words that stand in for other nouns. And we have some inflection of verbs as well. So I am and you are. She will have finished. You give, he gives, they gave. So we do have a little bit of inflection in verbs to indicate tense and person and other things that we're going to explore in a bit. In Greek, adjectives also are inflected. We don't really have examples of that in English. So let's talk about the terminology of language construction, because these are all words that are going to be used frequently and you need to have them in your head. So morphology is the system of different forms possible for a given word. We will talk about what is the morphology of X, and we need to know not only what part of speech it is, but that it's a plural possessive, or something like that. Now, words have patterns. I am, you are, he is. That's a pattern that we call a paradigm. It's how groups of words will change the same way. Ring, rang, rung, sing, sang, sung are both share a paradigm because their words do the same things in different tenses. Now, when we talk about the way words change, nouns, adjectives, and adverbs decline. I don't know why, but that's what we use. That's the word we use when we talk about the inflections of nouns. What declension is that? Whereas verbs conjugate. So conjugations are the inflections of the verbs. And overall, the arrangement of words used to create well-formed sentences in a given language is called the syntax. So declension and conjugation are the forms of the individual words. The syntax is putting the words into a well-constructed sentence. So not saying I, he, gave. That's not good syntax. And then grammar is actually everything put together, morphology and syntax together. So morphology is the individual words. Syntax is putting them into grammatical sentences, as we would say. It's putting them into proper usage. All right. So a phrase is simply a group of two or more grammatically related words. There's not many of these really. The common ones that we see are prepositional phrases. You've heard that since grammar school, where you have the preposition, its object, and sometimes some other words. So when she was only a teenager, Maggie decided to run for political office someday because she wanted to make a difference in the world and she wanted to make her mother proud. So for political office is a prepositional phrase. In the world is a prepositional phrase. Likewise, we have verb phrases. When we need groups of words to express a verb, which happens often in English, not as often in Greek. Greek does much more with single words. Very, very commonly, we get, noun phrases. Not just a single noun, but a noun modified by other things, like political office, or her mother, or the book that's on the table, or the man in the yellow hat. These are all just called noun phrases because they act together as one unit. And then finally we get clauses. And clauses are distinct because they need to have what's called a conjugated verb and its necessary arguments. These are all words we're going to talk about. A conjugated verb is something like decided to run for office. So there are 3 kinds of clauses. An independent clause is the main part of the sentence. So Maggie decided to run for political office someday is the independent clause in this sentence. We'll talk about why and what it's made up of as we go along, but just this is the part that can stand alone and still be a sentence. Its main verb is called a predicative, or I sometimes shorten it to predicate. So the predicative is another word for the main verb of the sentence. Okay, so decided is the main verb of the sentence. And the sentence is any textual unit that consists of 1 or more words, including an independent clause. So all I need to make a grammatical sentence is Maggie decided to run for political office someday. Nothing else in here as it stands, because she wanted to make a difference, is not a grammatical sentence. Because she wanted to make her mother proud is not a grammatical sentence. When she was only a teenager is not a grammatical sentence. Instead, independent clauses have to be able to stand by themselves. So, for example, in this short passage from the beginning of the Hellenica, stop it for a minute and identify what you think are the independent clauses and their main verbs, their predicatives. So, Tissaphernes came to the Hellespont is the first one. Tissaphernes seized him and imprisoned him in Sardis is the second. 30 days later, however, Alcibiades and Mantitheus provided themselves with horses and made their escape from Sardis by night to Clazomenae. So in each case, we have conjugated verbs that are independent clauses. Came, seized, imprisoned, provided, made. But we also have what are called subordinate clauses that cannot stand by themselves because they are introduced by some kind of subordinating conjunction. These are words like when and after and since and because. So when she was only a teenager is a subordinate clause. It doesn't stand by itself because it's not independent. It's because it's introduced by this subordinating conjunction. Because she wanted to make a difference is another subordinate clause because it's introduced by a subordinate conjunction. So again, look at this same passage and stop it for a minute and figure out which are the subordinate clauses. After this happened, when Alcibiades went to visit him, who had been taken prisoner? These are all what are called subordinate clauses, different kinds of subordinate clauses that we will explore in Unit 2. We're not going to be dealing with subordinate clauses until we get to the second half of this class. Finally, we have what are called coordinate clauses, and these can be either independent or subordinate. However, they have 2 halves or more than 2 halves. 2 or more equivalent clauses joined by a coordinator. So she wanted to make a difference in the world and she wanted to make her mother proud. These are balanced. So these are joined by words like and or, yet, but, neither nor, both and, various coordinating conjunctions or coordinators. So once more, look at the same passage and find the coordinators. We have 2 coordinated clauses. Tissaphernes seized him and imprisoned him, and we have Alcibiades and Mantitheus provided themselves with horses and made their escape. These are coordinated clauses. Alcibiades and Mantitheus is also coordinated, but those are simply coordinated words, right? There's no conjugated verb there. There's no verb that is changed in order to make sense in the sentence. So words are the single units. Phrases are hunks of words that function as one unit. And clauses are sections of a sentence around a verb that may be independent, subordinate, and or coordinate.